Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 170, is the new Quilters Quandary. What patterns should I choose and what are the best methods to use? But before we get to that, I started up here today to show you my pieced Weaver Fever. I started this way back when I used different rotary cutters to test which ones I liked best. So it's been a while, but I'm so pleased with how it turned out. Now there are 3 different versions of this pattern from Jackie Robinson. And this is no longer in print, but I can find it on Amazon. And that gives you all 3 versions. I have in the store, let me back up. The 3 versions are 3 fabrics of each of 2 colors. The other is 4 fabrics of each of 2 colors. And the last is 5 fabrics each of 2 colors. And she refers to them as 3 furs, it's a V, 3 vers, 4 vers, and 5 vers. This is a 4 ver, and we have that pattern in the shop, and it's available from her website too. And same with the 3 ver. And then I don't have the 5 ver in the store, but it is available off of her website. And I just love strip piecing, and I had so much fun. Linda here picked the fabrics for me. The only instruction I gave her was I wanted to use black for the background. And you've heard me say many times before that we're not big fans of kits here because we like things that are individual. If you would like us to custom cut fabric for you, we can do that. Just go ahead and email me at quiltersheaveninc@gmail.com. And it isn't a set price because it depends what fabrics are picked and what size quilt. So if you give us some parameters as to color and size, we can go ahead and pick the fabric for you if you don't have access to close by quilt shops or you're not comfortable picking fabric. Quilt shops are here to help. So that's the Weaver Fever. Let's get to the episode. What patterns should I choose and what are the best methods? Let's start with there are many different ways to accomplish quilting tasks. And because 2 people do things a different way doesn't make one better than the other. There are controversial issues in quilting that people can solve in different ways. There are also things that are non-controversial, that there's not a different side of the coin. I mentioned some of these when I talked about if the quilting fairies gave me 10 wishes. There shouldn't be anybody advocating leaving selvages into your project, leaving seams open, not sewed. There shouldn't be people advocating for you to see the stitching on the front of your quilt. That's your piecing stitching. Those are all construction issues that good teachers and good patterns should teach you not to do. I should say beginning books. Patterns won't talk about those kinds of things mostly. But let's talk about accomplishing the same thing in different ways. When I was piecing the apple door banner, Maria was aghast that I would not have washed that red fabric and put it together with the white fabric. Fabric bleeding is a big issue. A lot of people always wash and people never wash. I almost never wash. And how do I avoid bleeding? I use color catchers. So I wash it after it's pieced, throw in color catchers to avoid bleeding onto my white fabric. So here we go. Maria washes hers. I don't wash mine. We both end up with projects that aren't bleeding. Another example that I saw in the shop was the first thing I do when I start to bind is I lay the quilt out, I take the binding, and I lay it around the quilt and make sure that I don't get a join of the fabric strips right in the corner. Both Maria and Carol skip that step entirely. They just sit down and start sewing the binding on, and if it happens that they're getting to a corner and there's going to be a seam there, they stop, cut the binding, resew it so that the join is before the corner and doesn't end up in the corner. So two entirely different ways, but it accomplishes the exact same thing. You don't get a join of your binding in the corner where you're trying to miter the corner of your quilt. Both work. Why do I have this quilt behind me? This is another great example. This is Bonnie Hunter's 2024 Leaders and Enders quilt. I do not use leaders and enders. They're confusing to me. I'm working on a specific project. I don't want to have a side project that I'm working on at the same time. Also, my machine doesn't eat the beginnings and ends of my quilt pieces. I use a single hole plate. I have very little use for leaders and enders. How did I make her leaders and enders quilt? It's entirely strip pieced. So just because a pattern is written for leaders and enders, and you can make it that way if you use that technique, but for those of us who don't use that technique, that doesn't mean we can't make this quilt. We can still make it, we just make it in a different fashion. So I guess that whole thing of there being different ways to do things can get confusing for a new quilter. And we'll come back to that a little later in this episode. Let's now talk about good instructors and instructions. To me, in my opinion, good instructors say words like, I do this way, but there are other ways to accomplish the same thing. If you hear people saying always, never, you must, those to me, there's always exceptions and there's always other ways to do things. To me, these are the quilt police people. And as I always say, it's your project. You get to do it your way. And we say in the shop all the time, there are no quilt police. Good patterns will have pressing directions. I mean, they've made the quilt after all. They know which way the seam should go. You shouldn't have to figure it out. And they give you the sizes of the units as they are pieced. I didn't put this on here, but I find this true too. There are some patterns that the author has just gone on and on and on and used way more words than you need to use. And it gets confusing. So I would also add to this list clear, concise language. So as far as what patterns a beginner should start with, I've got a few here to show you. I didn't take these out of the plastic, so I hope they don't glare too much. But these are the AOK patterns, and they have, there's many of them. These are just a small selection, but they use 5 1-yard cuts. They also have baby ones that use 4 half-yard cuts. I have none of those to show you because the day before yesterday, while I had a whole supply of them, my customer bought every single one of them. So I will be restocking them. But the directions are clear, concise, and just very easy to follow and good for a beginner. Another one that I think is good, and these are still mostly very clear, but you do have to read them and follow in the order, It's not quite as clear as the A-OK, but they're still good and easy for a beginner. The Fabric Cafe books. And what we like about these is, besides it's just 3 one-yard quilts, they give 8 patterns in each book. They give instructions to make them bigger. So each pattern has 3. So there's essentially 24 in each book, and they're very reasonably priced. So really good for a beginner to start. Another book that we always liked, and I can't get anymore, but I'm sure you can find it on Amazon, is Sweet and Simple with the Twist. And this one uses 3 fabrics also, and it lets you use one big focus fabric if you've got something you don't want to cut up. They're easy. They just sew up fast, so if you have a quick project you need to do, that's a good choice. I've shown you these before, the Ursula Reich's books. While they say for baby, all you have to do is make more blocks and use adult fabric, and you can convert them to adult quilts. But they're, again, squares and rectangles, easy to put together, good directions. So I would recommend these as well. The last one I want to show you is Atkinson Designs. They're written really, really well. Here's 2 that just use squares and rectangles that we like a lot, Tile Tango and Yellow Brick Road. And if you're ready to move on to 60-degree triangles, Happy Holidays is another really good one. So as far as patterns, here's some really good options for beginners. And as you evaluate people giving you instructions, you want to look for red flags. I'm going to take a break. We'll be right back with those. Red flags to look out for in patterns are a few things. There's more than this, but these are 3 I see a lot. And this one is where someone tells you to take one of your same size piece blocks as that's in your body of your quilt, and tells you to cut it in half. And then that's supposed to be a half a block. Sometimes it's meant to be a side setting triangle. Sometimes it's meant to be the end of a row. It can be different uses, but cutting a block in half will not give you a half a block. Why? Because it doesn't account for the seam allowance. If you want to use this as a half a block, you can't cut here. You have to cut a 1/4 inch on the side. If you want to use this, you need to cut a 1/4 inch on this side. So you have to start with a bigger square. And that ties all back into Quilters math, which I'm not going to get into here, but we've done it on the channel before. So once you see somebody tell you to cut a block in half and use it as a half a block, you know that's not going to work. You're going to cut off points. The other thing I've seen several times is using half square triangles for side setting triangles and 1/4 square triangles for the corners. That is not good quilting practice. That leaves you the bias edges on the outside, which tend to stretch. You're much better off doing it the proper way, which is 1/4 square triangles for the side setting triangles and half square triangles for the corner squares. Now, remember when I said there's always an exception to the rule? I'm drawing a blank on her name. Karen Brown from Just Get It Done Quilts did a quilt not all that long ago, maybe a year ago. And I think she called it 1,000,000 Little Pieces or something like that. And to carry her design of the body of her quilt out into the side setting triangles and corner square triangles, she had to flip these and do it what we would call the not proper way. But she knew she was doing it, and the choice was to get the aesthetic that she wanted. And that's where quilters make decisions. And knowing that it's on the bias, she took all the proper precautions. You want to make sure everything's starched so it doesn't move. You probably stay stitch. you take extra steps to alleviate the problem of that bias edge on the outside. And her quilt actually turned out fantastic. But this is something to look for if there's not a reason to do this. You definitely want to keep your straight of grain on the outside of your quilt. The next one I see really often is taking 2 squares of fabric and sewing a 1/4 inch all the way around the outside and then cutting it and getting 4 half square triangles. Yes, you'll get 4 half square triangles, but the bias is on the outside again. This is just not a good quilt construction method. If you're being told to do that, when you read the pattern before you start, what you want to do is change it to using 2 at a time or 8 at a time. And even some people want to do 1 at a time because they don't want any duplicates. If you've got enough half square triangles in it, having 2 the same probably isn't an issue. But 2 at a time or 8 at a time will give you the bias on the sewn side and the straight of grain on the outside. And that's what you want to have. So while there's probably other things we can come up with, these are 3 big ones that I see that are red flags for bad patterns. Okay, let's finish this up. What should new quilters and even veteran quilters always do? Test, test, test. In embroidery, they always say there's those who test their embroidery patterns and those that wish they did. So whenever you're doing something that you haven't done before, take a test piece, make a block. I just rewrote a block for a customer because the quilt was going to be ginormous. And the way the pattern was, we didn't want to just make less blocks. It wouldn't work. The pattern wouldn't work out right. So I rewrote the pattern to a smaller block size. And I kept crossing out the cutting at 2 inches and writing in 1 1/2. 2 inches became 1 1/2. Well, guess what? I missed 1. So even though the strips were cut 1 1/2, when she subcut, she still subcut at 2, and that made her block the wrong size. But she had cut them all. If you make 1 block first, you'll save yourself from miscuts when someone forgets to mark one of the 2s, change it to 1 1/2. The other thing is, in a test, you'll find out if you like a technique. It would be insane to start your very first foundation paper piecing project with a Quiltworks Judy Niemeyer 110 square quilt, and then after 2 blocks find out you can't stand the method. So always test out a new technique. If you're doing something you haven't done before, you're making a bianni project, you've got foam in the center of 2 pieces of fabric, what stitch length should you use? Take a scrap of your fabric and test it out. See what stitch length you like, what works for you. You also would like to see what foot works best. We've done that in the shop several times where we don't know which foot is the best one to use, and we'll try the same thing with 3 or 4 different presser feet and find out which one works for us best. And that's, again, the whole thing that I always say is find out what works best for you. There's so many different ways to do things. And if you're a new quilter, you say, well, should I do it this way or that way? Well, there's no straight answer. I may do something one way, you may do it another way, and come out exactly the same, which is what I started this whole episode with. So just test, see what you like best, especially new quilters. And then again, to my new quilters, I say this all the time also, you only need to do 3 things: accurate cutting, accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, and good pressing. And if you do that, your quilts will come out absolutely beautifully. Okay, that's the episode. Let's get to the winner of the giveaway. The Amy Butler Stash Fat Quarter Bundle winner is Ronnie Susie Hall 619. So that's RONNIESUSIEHALL 619. Please send me your mailing address to quiltersheaveninc@gmail.com and I will get that right out to you. The new giveaway, it's not 15 fat quarters, but it's still quite good. It's a stack of 5 charm packs. There's one from Andover. This one is the Riley Blake one. We have a Kona Solids, so maybe some of these will go with one of these charm packs. And then 2 from Moda. And hopefully someone out there wants to make a fabulous quilt with this. There's no strings attached. Do with it what you want. The only thing that the people who give us this stuff want is that somebody uses it and enjoys it. So you know how to enter. You want to like my video. You want to comment on my video. And you want to subscribe to my channel. And in the comment, write charm packs. And you will be entered to win. So I want to thank all of you for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please keep the comments coming, and some questions would be good. I struggle a little bit with content every now and again, and if you give me some ideas, I would greatly appreciate it. That's today's episode. So until next time, happy sewing.